Right, thanks, Amanda. 12 away from 8 o'clock. The battle of the generations is playing out in the workplace. You'll all have your views on this too, won't you? Millennials versus Generation X, the boomers. Well, it's the boomers against all of us, really, isn't it? But are they really all as different as the stereotype suggests? Recruitment experts Robert Walters surveyed thousands of employees to find out what makes them tick and what ticks them off and all that sort of thing. And the results are quite surprising too. I like this stuff. New Zealand Director Shay Peters joins me now to talk us through the results. Shay, great to have you on the program.
Thanks, Duncan. Good morning.
Major findings?
Major and interesting, but not altogether unsurprising, I think, from our perspective.
Okay, so what did you find?
Yeah, we found that basically one of the biggest things that came out of the study was intergenerational conflict does exist. So there is now a generational gap between Gen Y or millennials and the baby boomers, and that was bridged with people like us, probably, who are sitting in Gen X, who are used to dealing with both.
Let's be clear so people know what we're talking about. So Generation Y are those born after 1980?
Correct. Yep.
Generation X are people like myself, born between 65 and 79.
That's right.
And the baby boomers are the ones with the fancy cars and houses.
Yeah. Mostly. Yeah. And the rest of us are trying to strive to get towards it. Yeah.
Okay, so are the millennials, the people born after 1980, the young ones, are they lazy and are they entitled?
No, it's a bit of a misnomer around being lazy. They just have a different style. And I think that if anyone deals with millennials or Gen Y on a daily basis, they just have a little bit more inherent confidence about them. They're born in the information age. Everything is accessible to them all the time. They know everything that's going on. Their finger is on the pulse. Very different to people from the baby boomer generation. They'll be sitting there reading their paper and they're having to wait for everything, basically. And it's the information age has played a big part in the generational conflict and the divide, I think.
Right. And the young ones, so the millennials or those post-1980, they're also willing to take on the boss, aren't they? They sort of, you have to earn their respect rather than, I'm your boss, respect me.
Yeah, so they definitely. So I think if you look at probably Gen X and baby boomers, really differential towards hierarchy in the most part. And I think that's a big point to play. Obviously, Gen Xers and baby boomers probably born to people who, raised by people who were around during the World War conflicts.
Yes.
And very differential towards hierarchy. They understand hierarchy. That's the way.
Well, we understand discipline too. Like, we were whacked at school. We were whacked by our parents. Like, they gave us a whack. And you went to school, you did something wrong, you got the cane. So we understand hierarchy.
Yeah, that's right. Gen Ys don't. They will question all the time. And I think from their leaders, the leaders need to earn Gen Y's respect.
See, I'm thinking I don't want to go to war with a millennial. I mean, and this is actually a relative, that's an extreme point of view, but what I'm saying with this is if you're an employer and you have a business where the chain of command is very important, you might want to look twice at actually employing Gen Ys.
No, I don't think so. I think you need generational diversity in the workforce to make the whole thing work. Because Gen Ys bring with them a lot of tools and tricks. They bring with them a really fresh way of thinking. They're prepared to challenge and they're prepared to agitate, which is what we need for the economy going forward.
But if you look at the baby boomers and the Generation Xers, we're still quite heavily involved in IT, aren't we? I mean, it's also not true that we don't have any digital footprint or that we don't get involved in IT. We do, and baby boomers do as well.
They do, they love it. And the study actually shows they embrace learning new things and developing. And that was one of the surprising things that came out of the study was all generations, top of their priority list around motivation in a role was learning and development.
Well, we created it, didn't we, really?
Well, I guess we did, yeah. Perhaps not me, but...
Our generation.
You can teach an old dog new tricks, can't you?
What do we want from our bosses? I mean, are all the generations the same in terms of our expectations of our bosses?
No, and I think it's interesting because if we reverse that question, and the question was asked of bosses, what do they think Gen Ys and Gen Xers want of them? Bosses thought that Gen Xers and Gen Ys wanted accessibility and open discussion. That's not actually true, and the study shows that millennials actually want someone they can learn off. They're two very different things, and they're two different approaches. So bosses actually chose that option down at number 6 in the study, which was right down the bottom.
What about the generations in terms of communication? Do we prefer to speak face-to-face with people, or are we now comfortable just dealing with people, emails, Instagrams, Twitters, Facebooks, digital versus real?
Yeah, well, this is the one thing where I might disagree with my study a little bit, and I'll be a little bit controversial about that for my guys. But every generation said they preferred face-to-face or open lines of communication. It's not necessarily what I've seen in the workplace, in my own workplace or in other workplaces. I think that there is definitely, the Gen Ys definitely like using their phones, definitely like social media, whereas people like, okay, that's a generalisation, people Gen X and Gen Y and baby boomers, very, very different in the way they approach communication.
Well, what's the most surprising thing you think you found out of the survey? The one thing that goes, oh, okay.
They're all motivated by the same thing. They all wanted constant learning and development.
Wow. What about money? What about salary? What about remuneration? Is that the key driver in a job?
It's the key driver to get a job. It's not the key driver to stay in a job. And that's quite an interesting point as well.
If you're going to use your study, let's say someone's going to use the findings of your study, do they have to be a little bit careful not to generalise, though?
Yeah, of course they do. But I think that each situation is taken in context, but I think generalisations really are where the economy is kind of going, and we've got to be thinking generally. Gen Ys are motivated by this stuff, baby boomers are motivated by this stuff, they learn in different ways. We've got to have generational diversity to make it work.
Shay, good to see you on the program. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Go and stand up to your boss. You going to do that?
My boss is sitting in Sydney, he's probably not watching.
You're a Gen X. You do what you're told. Now it's time to leave. Off you go.
Off you go. Go now. Hey, nice to see you. Thanks so much for coming on the program. We're 7 minutes away from